Hello. Well, this is Chasing the Facts. I'm Sam Chase, your host, and I'm glad to say we're back in studio after a brief hiatus, as most people certainly can understand as a result of COVID-19. We did one show in May that was Zoom and remote, and the consensus at that point was that that was not a very comfortable way to do it, and so we decided to suspend the show until such time as we could get back into the studio. Things have calmed down a little bit, at least in this area, and just so that the viewers understand, we are following all of the social protocols that have been outlined by the medical professionals. The number of people here in the studio is minimal. We have a producer, we have no camera people, and just the guest and myself. So there's only three of us. We came in wearing masks until such time as we sat down. We are distanced, what would you say, Phil, about 8 feet maybe?
8 feet. Sounds
about 8
right.
feet, yep. And so here we are, and I think hopefully this will work. Today's show, we're going to focus on the special town meeting, which will be held on August 24th. And we're going to be considering a land acquisition issue. But before we get into that, let's introduce our guest, Phil Stanway, who, and again, I'm not quite sure of your title, so I'll give you one. I'll say Chief Operations Officer of the Chelmsford Open Space Stewards. How does that fit?
Lead steward is
Okay.
what we call him.
So, Phil, why don't you just very briefly give our viewers a little bit of your background and how you came to do what you do and some of the things you do, and then we'll get into the meat of the discussion, which is the special town meeting warrant article.
I started out, I used to volunteer with a lot of groups, do a lot of hiking, do a lot of outdoor stuff, and I volunteered with the Star Island Corporation out in off the Isle of Shoals. And so when I left that and I got married and came to Chelmsford, I still wanted to do the hiking and the maintenance of trails, and disappearing into the woods in the middle of January for a week did not go down well with my new wife. And so I started looking at places in Chelmsford, the first site, and they were very run down. So I said, no, I've been doing this for years, let's get some people and clean it. And I went to the Board of Selectmen and said, I'd like to start clearing all these trails and upgrading your whole trail system for nothing, and we'll put new bridges in. And they were crazy enough, and you were one of them.
I was one of them.
To say,
The operative word for me was free labor. That's
Free
it.
labor.
Sign the man up.
and here we are 15 years later,
Yep.
and we've maintained on and off, I think about 25 sites around town, which is most of the majority of our open space. We're on liaison with various groups, somewhere in the high 80s for Eagle Scout projects, couple hundred work parties, and we take care of 4 farms, 3 working farms, and Red Wing Farm, and some open space, some conservation land. We have an agreement with the land trust. We're going to get an agreement with the water department. So we're spread out all over town, and we just maintain trails, and like a bond raising. When something needs to be done at the site, we bring all the people in from the other areas, and we just maintain it, and it's been going gangbusters.
And we have, it's over 1,000 acres, don't we, in various open spaces?
Well over 1,000 now.
Okay, that's just wonderful for the town. So, and that's been going on for about 15 years.
November 5th, 2005.
Okay, that's how I remember it. So, and the town has benefited tremendously from your stewardship and all of the volunteers that you've been able to corral and cajole, or whatever the verb is you want to use, bribe into doing all this free work. And in addition, the donation of machinery, heavy equipment and so forth, earth-moving things, and to get stuff done. It's just amazing. So here we are, and what we have before us now is an opportunity. The town has been presented with an opportunity to buy approximately 54 acres of what is now currently classified farm use land. And the properties in question are largely at 95 Boston Road. We have a little over 53 acres. And then we have 2 very small contiguous parcels that form part of this proposal. One is located off Parker Street, approximately 3/10 of an acre. The other is off Bartlett Street, approximately 4/10 of an acre. So in the aggregate, all 3 added together come up to just a shade over 54 acres. So we have a warrant article, and the purpose of the town meeting is to see if the town will vote to authorize the Board of Selectmen to acquire by purchase, gift, eminent domain, or otherwise the 3 parcels that I've just described. And the idea is if the town buys the property, then the town obviously will have complete control over the disposition of the property, how it's used, and so forth. But the idea is, if you read further along in the warrant article, it talks about buying it, and the contingencies are, as expressed in Massachusetts General Law, Section 184, which talks about the various types of restrictions that can be put on the property. You can have conservation restrictions, preservation restrictions, and so forth. And then the funding mechanism, it also talks about, although we don't have a specific amount that, and Phil will address that in a minute in his remarks, but the funding mechanism at least partially will be, as described in Chapter 44 of the Mass General Law, and that talks about community preservation funding and how that works. So that's the, have I left anything out?
No, you're right.
Okay, that's the backdrop. So with all of that, I'm going to turn this over to Phil, and we're going to let him explain to us about the property and why it is such, and you know, I'm not going to pretend to be neutral on this. I am fully in favor of this proposal, and as a town meeting rep, I intend to vote for it, and I will urge everybody else. But let's let Phil now describe what the benefits are and why this is such a good deal for the town. So go ahead,
think
Phil.
first thing we should do is have a quick look at the property itself. It's off the grid, and it's always been a private farm, so no one's really seen it. And if you take a look at this one picture here, that's pretty much the money shot. I mean, it's absolutely beautiful. And to realize that's less than half a mile out at the town center, and it's amazing farmland. It's got old growth trees and wooded area, and it's currently a hay farm. And as you can see, supports plenty of wildlife that we saw out there. But the old farm roads that have been there for hundreds of years. When you realize that on this farm, the Minutemen mustered before they went to Lexington and Concord, right there, and it's still the same as when it was there.
So would we consider that a historical?
I would consider it. It was here before the country was here, and one of the reasons the country is here, and for history to be looking exactly like it did 400 years ago. That alone is
amazing.
Is amazing, and you could just. It's a stunning sight. It took my breath away. I didn't know it was in Chelmsford, and I'd never been on the site until these photographs were taken. As you can see,
It's hard to hide 54 acres, isn't it?
It is. But I would say it's the only property that comes near it in the area is Great Brook, and I think it is far nicer and far less undeveloped than Great Brook, and to get it for around $1 million is we're wearing masks now, and I think the town meeting reps are wearing masks for a reason, because this is the best land deal.
The steal of the century.
It really is. If you think of that, a plot of land in town goes for $250,000 an acre.
A buildable acre in this particular section of town. That's accurate. Yes.
And that's always going up. So if you say around $1 million, that's 4 buildable lots. So for what it would cost to buy 4 buildable lots in town, we're getting the other 48 acres for free. The best BOGO you're ever going to get. Everyone I've spoken to has spoke. This is an absolute slam dunk. The only concern I have is we need to show up to vote. We have to be careful about people saying, well, this is a done deal, this is a done deal, this is a done deal, and not show up. The opportunity of not getting enough people to vote on this would be disastrous. I don't think it's going to happen, but I don't take any vote for granted anymore.
Oh, no, you can't.
And especially when you throw in the COVID and everything. So I would say call your rep and say, first, are you going to vote for it? And then, no matter what they say, they should show up. This is going to be a short meeting, 1 article. The farm itself, I see 3 major sections of it. There's the farmland, which is currently all hay fields. Those hay fields would have to be stripped, reseeded, and done, because the farm itself has been winding down for a while now. The equipment is insufficient, and So it would take to bring it back into active
So
agriculture.
you wouldn't, at this point, consider it any part of that to be a working farm? Or is it?
It's working, but the quality of the hay that comes out of it.
So the
is
haying
malted.
is probably the principal operation?
Yeah, right now. But even at that, you'd have to strip it and regrow it.
Yep.
It's not. It could be, and then besides that, other agriculture is possible. The ramp up is not bad. If you figure Sunny Meadow, that was 2007 when that one was taken. I think 2007, 2008.
That sounds right.
And now we're still moving it into a working farm. And that's a good idea to talk about is Sunny Meadow. Because people say, what are we going to do with this farm? How are we going to do it? Is it going to be public? Is it going to be walking trails? I've offered a few walks at Sunny Meadow because that's our what I think is an ideal situation. We have 5 farmers there.
And that may be considered reasonably to be a sort of a predictor of what this property could become.
Right.
Yep.
We've worked out, it's a prototype. We worked
Exactly.
out a lot of the kinks. We have 2 large farmers. We have 2 micro farmers, and one of them is growing for the community garden. The other is doing maple syrup. We have the Chays who do greens in Asian greens in the big greenhouse. We have the hydroponic lettuce, and we have the composting. And then we have 3 community gardens and a public area, and walking trails, and the storybook trail, and the sunflower field. So there's and a picnic area. So what it is it's when we first got the farm, there was a lot of concern from the abutters. People are going to be stealing stuff. People are going to be coming into their house. You're going to be noisy. And about 6 years later, we started hearing other things from the abutters. It's like, well, can we take these trees down because it's such a great view and it's such a great asset? Can we put a connecting trail and make it private? And now it's a huge draw, and all the neighbors love it. So we expect there will be some kind of transition. Chelmsford currently has 3 farms that I consider active working farms. We have the Shea Farm, which the Parlays use.
Right.
We have Watton Street, which is now Bits and Piece Farm, and that's brand new in North Chelmsford this year, and that's expanding. And we have Sunny Meadow. So the largest farmer in the town of Chelmsford is the town of Chelmsford. And in 1960, we had over 100 farms. And now you can probably count them on one hand. Yeah. And the future is going to be micro farmers, like artisan farmers, I think. Right. Where Sunny Meadow, we've started moving in that direction with smaller farmers using smaller pieces and expanding and contracting. And I think Warren will probably go that way eventually. We'll start out with hay, and then we might have a small farmer over here, a small farmer over there. And you add to that the walking trails. The trees alone haven't been really harvested that much out there. So it's old growth, not technically old growth, but it's very old trees, nice wide trails. The invasives aren't too bad. It'll probably only take maybe 7 to 10 years to get most of the invasives out of there, which is short term for long-term management. As for water, Beaverbrook runs through it. The water department has also got a stamp on part of that, and that is
Yes, and that is mentioned in the warrant article, that is a potential use of the property as
right.
well.
And the problem with Chelmsford is we're tight on water. And
yes.
And to put a well in, you need 800. I think it's 800 feet from the wellhead in all directions with no buildables, and you can't find that anymore.
I did not know that. That's good information.
So that's why they were looking. They put it there, and they also put one in at Misty Meadows, and they don't need them right now, but they're looking at what's going to be happening in 10, 20 years. So that's why they're putting the place stamps on there, and it's also on a different aquifer. Chelmsford, there's 2 aquifers,
Right.
and so they want to put ones on one and the other so they can what they call rest wells, from what I hear. So you can change one, change the other if one goes.
That makes perfect sense.
And it's smart that they did that, and advantageous because anytime you have a well, you need to put a road, you have to maintain and put a road in. So bang, I'm hoping that we can leverage that to get an entrance.
That's a good point. What currently is the access to the main property on Boston Road? How would you get to it?
Well, the two main heavily used accesses are both gone because they left with the sale.
Okay.
The houses were. There's a very small one on Boston Road coming in.
So you can get, theoretically, you can get to it through
Boston Road.
Boston Road, but,
But-
not Route 27.
No, because that's privately closed off.
Okay.
But even that way, when you're coming in from Boston Road, you're basically driving through someone's living room because it's the old farm road that went right next to the house.
Yes.
There are two side entrances, one that goes out by the Wright Reservation and one that goes out by Bartlett. Because originally these farm roads they were way before the houses were built, but they weren't always heavily used. So that is going to be a question. But the advantage of the water department being on is maybe, they can sort out a decent access. The site already has water. It already has bond structures, nice bond structures. And it's a turnkey. The woods are in amazing shape. The trails are in amazing shape. It could probably be brought up once parking and entrances brought in. I could see that opening to the general public by this time next year, realistically.
Now, this is a selectman's article.
Yeah.
Do you know who will be presenting?
I don't know who is presenting on that.
It could be the town manager. Very often, the selectman will ask the town manager to present, or they could do it themselves, or they could ask you or anybody, really, to do it for them if that's what they wanted to do. But that you haven't been asked to present the article at this point?
No. I might speak and I might not speak, because if it's, we really want to make sure that this is a quick town meeting.
Right. I mean, and the moderator will get a very quick sense of how it's going to go. I mean, and even if it's something that most people feel probably is non-controversial, we always have those people, town meeting reps, who just like to speak on any topic. So I think the moderator will get a very quick sense of how he thinks it's going to go.
I think the concern is going to be that we're so cash-strapped at this point. They're going to say, well, we don't have any money, we're doing that. But this is coming out of CPC funds. Okay. This money has been allocated for that reason.
And this is a good thing to talk about because, as you said earlier to me off camera, we cannot ever make any assumptions or take anything for granted when it comes to voting on issues. So we're not going to know what the outcome is until it's over.
Right.
So the initial appeal is, for people who are interested in this article, town meeting reps, to please come to town meeting. All of the social distancing and the protocols that are in place for COVID-19 are going to be strictly observed, as they were for the Springtown meeting in June. I thought that went very well. And out of 162 reps, we got it was about 115, I think, who showed up. And that, quite frankly, surprised me, that it was that number. So hopefully we'll get the same result here. As many people should show up as possibly can. But let's on the devil's advocate side, let's take the naysayers, and we always have naysayers in town. And you brought up, I think, is a very valid point. $1 million is $1 million, okay? Right. And with what's going on now with the pandemic conditions and other things, and a lot of uncertainties in terms of potential sources of funding that we usually have in town, people are concerned about revenue. Revenue shrinkage for the town budget to fund things that most people consider essential. This is not considered an essential, even though some people might, depending on their philosophy. But we don't have to buy this property, okay?
Correct.
So what are, in your opinion, what are the main benefits of the town purchasing this particular property, or any potential open space for that matter?
I've been pro and con on some purchases.
Okay.
When it came to Misty Meadow, I said, no, it's not worth it.
Well, now, see, I'm glad you mentioned that, Phil, because that lends credibility to your thought process. You're not just in the tank 100% for buying land. I mean, there has to be a reasonable basis for the purchase of the land. So
you have to get a value. At Misty Meadow, the original plan was to develop some and then give the rest to conservation. So what the developer was taking versus what it was cost for the entire property and what we're getting back made it so why spend the money when we're getting 80% of it in conservation anyway. Now that flipped around with the water department saying they'll buy the whole property. But that I was a pass on. I said, you take your best buy. And so I said, Misty Meadow, whatever happens there is fine. But the Warren property, this has been farmland for 17 generations, and it's a 1 in 17 generation sale, and that's the way I look at it. And we can't wait another 17 generations.
That's a good point. And what happens if the town passes on it and presumably the owners want to sell and get some money out of the property? They're going to sell, most likely, to private
developers.
So what is the possibility? What happens if that happens? What is the negative consequences for the town if that happens?
Well, I've seen development in town, and the good one is Acton Road, where it's right next to the land trust property. It's 1.3 acres. And they were trying to jam 60-something units into that 1.3 acres.
Yes.
4 stories. And so when they say, okay, there's 5 building lots on this property, I just don't buy that anymore. Because somehow, they pull some clause
You never know, do
that
you?
from 1912 was allowed, and next thing those 5 lots turn into 100. But this is the cost of trying to keep those up. We're over sewage capacity, or the schools are getting hammered. We're adding 400 units in North Chelmsford.
Well, even if it is only 5 acres, again, to your point, I mean, under state law, there are local zoning overrides, affordable housing.
Yeah.
Okay, and you can cram 20 or 30 units onto an acre.
Right. And even if the town gets past the buyback on that one,
Right.
In this particular case, it would be the area we'd lose with the old woods, the wooded trails in that area. That's just so valuable. We have nothing in town like that. We have no old growth trees. Everything was cut down for decades. And if you saw the picture with the ferns and everything, that is so unique. That's what people are going to Great Brook for, the back end of that.
Yes.
And that's why, and it's right there. It's half a mile from the town center. And the fact that it's pristine farmland, and you saw that picture where you're just looking out across those fields.
Those are beautiful photographs.
Those are, Eric Sidakia, he shot most of those. We brought a professional in to shoot them. I had never set foot in the property because it was so private until that day. And magical is the only, I've seen a lot of open space in town, and that is.
The photos, as good as they are, really don't do the property justice.
No, it's
you get a nice clear day with blue sky and everything and a nice setting, and you look at that property, and it is absolutely gorgeous.
I think we've stepped up. Chelmsford will have a premier site, one that dwarfs anything in the town has, with history, and it's got it's a no-brainer.
What kind of now, assuming we do get the property, and the article contemplates it talks in general language, because the warrant articles cannot be that specific. They have to be worded generally to allow for some flexibility on town meeting action. But what kinds of restrictions would you anticipate, or would you even recommend? I mean, there are several different kinds of conservation or preservation type restrictions that could be put on the property. What would you suggest or think is appropriate?
It's going to need one, and it's probably going to be held by the land trust. It took a couple years to negotiate the one at Sunny Meadow. Because the land trust, which I'm a director of, I like to say that, they're careful. When they put a preservation restriction on it, they've checked it 15 different ways.
Made sure the loopholes aren't there.
Oh, yeah, they take all the loopholes out. They close them forever.
Good.
And they're very pro keeping it as it is. It's really the model with the other farms we have, which is Sheehan, Sunny Meadow, and Watton Street. Sunny Meadow is held with a conservation restriction from the land trust. And what they do is they look at uses and say, is this use good? Is that use bad? Did they want to do this type of farming, or some things are completely not allowed, like soil removal and things like that. So they're very careful, and if something has to come down, it has to be restored. So that conservation restriction is a safety.
And that can be structured to allow for some variation in terms of how the property is going to be managed or administered?
Yes, there's some agricultural, and then there's a general one. It would probably have to be a general one because there's some use in there, non-agricultural use. Agricultural one is very strict. I think we only have one of those, and that is maybe Sheehan and parts of Sunny Meadow and agricultural only. The rest of Sunny Meadow is on a general one.
Now, assuming we do that and assuming we follow that, your recommendation, which I think is very soundly based and a good one, and certainly we have the history to prove that in the other areas that you mentioned, what kind of access, after this is done, assuming it's a done deal, what kind of access generally would the public have to the property?
Well, it's the same thing with Sunny Meadow. First you go to the farmers and you say, what do you need? Now do you have to get in? Because they're the primary. Mm-hmm. And then you go to the neighbors and you try to protect their interests. And then you balance that off with the public interest.
So that process, that would be a process of negotiation with different potential stakeholders in the situation.
We've done that at Sunny Meadow. You'll see some areas where, like, the walking trails go right through the property, the farmland. And we've added, no trespassing signs and a few things that people are getting in the walking in the fields. So it's an ongoing, daily, living, changing creature. Each of those farms. I'm on the Sunny Meadow at least once a day. I talk to all the farmers, I talk to the community gardeners, I talk to the micro farmers, and I talk to the people who are coming on the property. Mm-hmm. And you try to take all those different things and balance them, and the abutters. So you balance them to see what's the best outcome, how are people most happy. And I don't think we've had a single complaint from Sunny Meadow to the town.
I'm not aware of any.
And yeah. That's because you just have to be engaged every day. Work with the farmers, work with the people, be responsive, handle any issues. And I think that's what the Warren one is going to be, the same one. There'll be a big ramp up when we start, sorting out who gets what and how the town wants to manage it. And then if they want the stewardship to be part of that solution, and the land trust, working out the agreement. So there's a lot of questions, but I think if people are worried about something, come to Sunny Meadow. Find me, I'll give you a tour.
I'm glad you said that, because that was going to be my next comment. And my understanding is people should understand now that the land is still under private ownership.
Right.
So they cannot actually go on the land to see. However, if you want a good working example of what the potential for this property is going to be.
One of the possible potentials.
Right.
I mean, if a working farm, this is going to be sort of a working farm, I can see it as a working farm and also as
but even just to get a sense of what happens when you put
right.
these kinds of property under the control of the town and they're not developed. So you would contact Phil, and how would they do that?
They can email me, lowellbritt, LOWELLBRIT, @comcast.net. Or you can text me, 978-273-1474. I do actually have a real day job, and I don't work for the town. Some people think that. So text me, and if it's between 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, I'm still paying my rent and the incredibly high taxes in town. So, but if we're buying places,
that's how
like
we know he's a Chelmsford resident. He's complaining about his property taxes.
But as a tax-paying resident, I love our open space, and I think this is an opportunity that we can't pass. Some of them we passed in the past, but this one we cannot pass up. Talk to your Tom Rep, go there. This is going to be something that a sea-level change in what we do our open
Correct.
space. So.
It is, we have about a minute left, and just to reiterate what we've said, this is a once-in-a-lifetime, as Phil said, every 17 generations lifetime for the town to acquire approximately 54 acres of this beautiful land. And the upsides, as Phil has given you some of the benefits for why we need to do this. But just very basic. The town buys it, the town has control over it. The town doesn't buy it, and it's bought by private developers. We've lost control, potentially, of 54 acres of pristine property. And I urge everybody in this town to take an interest in this. This is a critical issue for the town. We cannot pass on this opportunity. As Phil said, talk to your town meeting reps, become informed, and urge a positive vote on Article 1 for the special town meeting August 24th to consider the purchase of the Warren farm. Thank you very much.